got mass transit and passenger rail security during special events. I'm Polly Hanson. I'm the Senior Director of Security Risk and Emergency Management from the American Public Transportation Association, which is the oldest and largest advocacy group for mass transit and passenger rail in North America. And so here I focus on security, emergency management, but I come from industry. I was in law enforcement for 40 years. Over 30 of that was spent in transportation policing. I had the opportunity to serve as Amtrak's police chief. In fact, that's where I met Jim because they were not doing the program with TSA then. And I knew of the program that Jim manages now because I had also been with the Metro Transit Police in Washington, D.C., and was their chief. And we were early partners of the program that Jim has. So what we know and what we've heard here, it's been alluded to by the previous presenters, is over the next decade, the United States is going to host many international sporting events, as well as, of course, we've got the nation's 250th anniversary coming up. So these events are going to put U.S. transportation systems on the global stage. So what we know about major events, ranging from international sporting events to large-scale cultural gatherings, is they draw millions of visitors. And of course, as I just alluded to, capture global attention. And so what the FTA, this is a quote for them, would say that public transit is critical to the success of events, and that serving as a primary means, and I mean primary means, of moving people safely and efficiently. Transit agencies are key players in shaping the visitor experience, which leaves a lasting impact on how cities in the nation are perceived globally. So what we know now is that special events really do not happen in a city that doesn't have mass transit. And you could say, well, wait a minute, you just had the Super Bowl. And, you know, the NFL experience was downtown. That's true. And BART had, the Bay Area Rapid Transit had unprecedented ridership. But then you also had the Super Bowl at Levi Stadium, and you had a different transit system and Amtrak and commuter rails serving that event. You know, you have a Super Bowl in Phoenix, which they've hosted any number of special events. Well, you know, that stadium is also not in the city. So mass transit did not serve that stadium. But once again, the NFL experience was downtown. People use their light rail and their buses to get to that event. And that's what happens in cities all over America. And what we do know is that even cities that aren't host cities for the FIFA World Cup will be possibly hosting teams where they'll be staying. So there are any number of American cities that are going to be impacted by these special events, either because they're a host or indirectly supporting. So regional transportation systems, as I'm trying to explain, play a critical role in ensuring safe, clean, efficient, and resilient mobility for the employees, because the employees have to be safe, to host the city residents, and then the influx of visitors. And this is actually a picture from the recent Super Bowl on VTA. So agencies have to have effective security practices and actionable measures for securing critical infrastructure during special events, planned and unplanned. And that's very different than, you know, Jim alluded to, and so did Janice, things that are going to happen at the stadium. You have much more control there because you have the ability to have layered protection. You know, Jim alluded to, you know, chem bio, you know, explosives, other types of security, you know, tremendous camera systems, also looking at social media, you know, down to tracking, you know, how many glasses of wine or who's drinking Bud Light. And that certainly is not the case with the critical infrastructure that is mass transit and passenger rail, because the mass word is what makes it a very open environment. And while you may have a system, and, you know, I was the Amtrak chief when New Jersey Transit hosted a Super Bowl, and everybody was required to go through the one Lautenberg station. And actually the deployment of a technology that Jim was first testing there happened. So everybody had to flow through that. But, you know, getting to that station, you know, they were not screened. And so certainly, as we know, you know, people are going to look for the area that's less secured. And in the case of some of the events that we're going to have coming up in the next couple of years, there is a concern, and the previous presenter alluded to that, about pedestrian flow. And so if you've got the stadium as a hardened target, there's layers of security at the transit stations, then the pedestrian movement will be very critical to the safety and security of the visitors and attendees to those events. So mass transit does a lot to ensure that they're ready. And so these industry efforts or these practices involve SOPs, enhanced security. And so by SOPs, you certainly do have to have, what are you going to do? What's the emergency management program? What's everybody's role? The enhanced security is precisely the kind of things that Jim was talking about. And, Jim's everybody's best friend right now because everybody wants to deploy that technology. And of course, he doesn't have enough to go around. He alluded to that, they have the one truck, and that one truck's not going to be everywhere that we're hosting events during the FIFA World Cup or even during the Olympics. The focus is on LA, but LA is not the only city that are going to be hosting events. Partnerships, we heard that here, the partnerships with state, other volunteer groups that can help with wayfinding. Certainly your federal partners are extremely important. And of course, the federal partners have so much to offer in the way of both tabletop exercises, threat and vulnerability assessments, so you know where you are the weakest and where you need to mitigate risks, and the drills and exercises that CSA perhaps can help agencies with prior to hosting a special event. You have to have a service plan. New Jersey Transit's got a very interesting one for their FIFA, where riders will be diverted other places and attendees to the games will be the focus of their regular service. But service plans are extremely important. And those service plans are important to plan for an incident. I run the PTI-SAC for TSA, the Public Transportation Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and we're looking at the events of terrorism and sabotage that happen with mass transit and passenger rail in Italy. And so, in the event that you had disruption to rail service, you have to have a service plan that accounts for that as well. And then certainly having a focus on and communication with customers. In the case of World Cup, and really the Super Bowl, you have people coming from all over the world. English may not be their primary language. Their systems may do a different type of fare media. You have more and more systems in the United States going to where you can actually use your phone and whatever media you have in your phone. That's ideal. But in the event you don't, you're going to have to communicate to your passengers how they get that fare media so that they can easily come in the station and board a train or a bus. I mentioned drills and exercises, hugely important, required for NSSEs, for both the Secret Service to have and a host. And of course, once again, TSA has the ability to support agencies when they're going to have an event. And of course, drills and exercises just can't solely be focused on terrorism. Weather is a huge component. And we recognize that, here I'm in Washington, D.C. When I was the chief of the transit police, we had a plan for weather in the mall. And people would be searched and screened going into the mall. But there were times when there would be a cell and lightning was going to come, and that secured contained area had to be cleared out. Those people had to go to safe refuge and then had to be rescreened to come back in. And so sometimes it's really important to make sure your drills and exercises include weather. And then, of course, there's been so much of a conversation about the use of technology. Jim referenced drones. For instance, MARTA, the agency in Atlanta, has a very strong drone program, uses drones to look at the pedestrian flow so that they can anticipate when they're going to have an influx of riders or what's happening topside in the street. So it's just another eyes in the sky that allows them to provide the best level of service because they know what's happening outside of the stations and topside. So industry efforts, APTA, along with our members, did go to Congress and advocate for the additional funding. And of course, host cities for FIFA will get funding through the host city committee. And then, there's still a conversation about the funding for the Olympics. APTA has created a task force, so many of our members are a member of this mega event task force, where people are having the ability to ask for additional resources, exchange best practices. We've hosted any number of webinars. Last year we had one with our European colleagues, Belgium, the Netherlands, London, and Paris, with 3 of them to talk about hosting World Cup, and then with Paris to do an after action about the Olympics, and particularly both the sabotage and the cyber event that happened. Of course, people are going to need new equipment and technology. Everybody would like to have that playbook that Jim has for the items that work, that leverage the technology that you already have, so that you can use whatever funding you're getting to really multiply your ability to be less reliant on human resources and augment your plans. Creation of playbooks. Both the Federal Transit Administration and LA Metro have created a playbook, not just for FIFA World Cup, but for special events. And then, of course, the sharing of best practices with both national and international industry partners. So I alluded to the webinar that we hosted with our European colleagues. We have an association in Europe that's much like ours. We worked with them to facilitate that conversation. We had hundreds of folks before the FIFA security committees were even created, just to get people kind of, what should you think about? And one of the takeaways was fireworks. And while in many of the jurisdictions where FIFA World Cup games will be hosted, fireworks aren't permitted. Apparently, the people who do attend these events really like to blow off fireworks. So that's an additional security concern that people now know about because they heard our European partners talk about that. So I just have a list of some of the resources. There's a link to the LA Metro playbook. It's called Set Go. You can Google it and also get it. We are a standards development organization. We have any number of standards about special events. There's also a link to the DOT FTA major event playbook. And then I've also have a link, we've not mentioned human trafficking, what a huge component that is, what a huge security risk that poses as well, and that it is a dynamic of any of the special events that people are going to host. There's an organization called TAT, Truckers Against Traffickers, and they provide free training and actually have a matrix on kind of steps that you would take. It's very applicable to a transit agency to have in their command center, where the buses and rail personnel call in, their operations command center. So it would tell both an operator what to do, and then if an operator or a citizen calls in and sees something, it tells whoever's answering the phone what to do about human trafficking. As I mentioned, I do manage the PTISAC for TSA. That's our site. If somebody is interested in getting the PTISAC, we put out a report daily, both about cyber and then about physical security. And, we do have membership criteria, but if you are eligible, be happy to get that out. We've already had some special editions on both human trafficking, about special events, and we're working with the MS-ISAC and others to prepare one about the events that happened in Italy with that resulted in sabotage of their system.